one of the best people we had was the idea that we picked up Ruben Morales mid-season, picking up an all-star. Let's give him another huge round of applause. I need to introduce Karl Rove, which is a bit of a task. I thought, how on earth am I going to do this? And then I realized we have some similarities. Karl, I don't know if you're aware of this. I originally went to architecture school. Apparently you went on to be a real architect. Karl's from Texas. Many of our friends are moving to Texas. I've designed one or two get-out-the-boat operations. He's gotten half a country to get out the boat. I wrote a book. You're probably going to read his book. Now this is where the comparison becomes somewhat interesting. As you know, Karl Rove actually has done virtually everything you can do in politics. And he rose to the very height of politics for someone who's chosen his path and his career, including, of course, designing magnificent victories in 2000 and 2004. And quite honestly, there's probably no better strategist in the last 40 years in Republican politics. Now, the thing about it is to do that takes an enormous intellect and a lot of thinking. And here's the interesting part. It's pretty much science, sort of like global warming, that. And if you are that brilliant and think that hard, it can actually have a somewhat negative effect on your hairline. And obviously, I learned from that error and have no desire to go down that path. America's great strategist for not only California, but for our country. Let's give it up to the one and only Karl Rove.
Sir, you sit down, sir, you can eat. Thank you, Tom, for that very funny introduction. Mostly true, but I noticed you're starting to show a little bit in the front and compensated for in the back. I'm honored to be here today. Summoned as I was by Jim Wilkie, who found out I was in California and has occupied every waking moment that I was not involved in trying to earn a living. You will come to know exactly what I'm talking about if you elect him chairman, because every one of you will be occupied every waking moment. I'm honored to follow Ruben Morales. I'm a little bit mystified. We were colleagues together at the White House, and he's really a fine human being, a really smart person, and a great leader. And I'm thrilled at what he's doing. I really am. It's really important, not just simply for California, but for the country, that Ruben's efforts succeed. There are others around the country who are involved in the same effort, and it's either going to make the future of the Republican Party brighter and the future of our country brighter, or we're going to fail. I am, however, a little bit mystified when he said it was a one-time honor for us to work together. There are two ways you can read that. Like maybe he'd never want to have that experience again. But anyway, I'm delighted to follow my friend Ruben, particularly since his message is my message. And we need to, we're Republicans not because we believe in interest. We're Republicans because we believe in universal values. Liberty, freedom, personal responsibility, limited government, opportunity, the ability of every human being to dream a big dream and rise. Not because we believe in that government needs to give this to this individual or give to this group, or government is there to make decisions about rewarding some and penalizing others. It's about limited government that allows every person a chance to rise in life. And if our values are universal, then we have an obligation to argue on behalf of those values in every corner, in every crevice, in every community of our great country. And let's be honest, we haven't been doing that pretty well in recent years. We've been carry them throughout the country, and ask for the vote. And to more and more pay attention to who's asking for the vote. Because there's a limit to the confidence and trustworthiness that people have in strangers. We need to be asking for the vote in the most powerful way possible, which is to have people asking for the vote who are comfortable and look like and sound like the people they're asking the vote from. Look, I'm Norwegian. I look at my shoes a lot. I don't dance, I twitch. And David's are comfortable hearing from me, but not too many other people. And we need to have the diversity that is America. And if we do, we'll have success. Let's be honest, we're not exactly in the best place in California. You're sitting there saying, can we come back? And my answer is yes, you can, but only if you have a belief that you can, and you take the values that we have and go sell them as hard as you can. When I moved to Texas, they hunted Republicans with dogs. We had 150 members of the Texas House of Representatives, and I went to work for the senior Republican. We had 13. We'd had a hell of a recent election. Out of the 31 members of the Texas State Senate, we had doubled our support in the State Senate in one election cycle alone. We've gone from 1 to 2. We had O.H. Ike Harris and Mad Dog Mingan, Walter Mad Dog Mingan. In Texas, you have to have 4 names if you want to run for office. We had a brief period of time during which we had not elected a constitutional statewide office. Just a brief period of time. 114 years. And yet, within the matter of a few years, we had it all. Second guy to get elected as a Republican governor of Texas was a fellow you've heard of named George W. Bush. When he ran for re-election in 1998, we took every one of the 28 statewide elected offices in Texas. White men were the minority. The majority of our ticket were African Americans and Latinos and women. Our Supreme Court of 9 members has a minority of white guys. Same with the Court of Criminal Appeals. Our comptroller, which is a powerful position in Texas, is a 6'2" tall Texas woman named Susan Combs. She's a cattlewoman. She was previously our agriculture commissioner. She went to a good A&M school called Vassar. You know what we have in Texas today? We have 101 out of 150 in the Texas House of Representatives after the last election. The most conservative part of Texas is called the Piney Woods, behind the Pine Curtain in deep East Texas, but it's very conservative and very Democrat. And we have an African American Republican state representative from the heart of deep East Texas. My message is this: get off your ass. We can't do it. We can't let them have the satisfaction of it. So we've got to do what you've got to do, which is rebuild your organization from the ground up. Losing has one great benefit to it. It gives you a chance to start fresh, to look at everything anew, and start rebuilding from the ground up in innovative and thoughtful ways that will expand our reach, and expand our activity, and expand our victories. It's not just the tactical things of a better get-out-the-vote operation or bigger federated Republican Women's Club or a campus Republican club at every college, or it's not just every precinct covered and people walking the door. It's not just the tactical stuff. We got a strategic issue. We have great principles, but we sometimes talk about those principles in a way that makes it sound like it's 1968 or 1980 or 2000, and it's not. It's 2012 on its way to 2014. So we need to have a robust activity within our party to take these timeless principles and apply them to the new circumstances that the country finds itself in. And we need to talk about our principles in a way that people can get their Northern College Republicans, one of our patron saints, was an upstart congressman from Northern New York called Jack Kemp, and he kept talking about this thing called the Laffer curve. And he was in the minority in the House. We had a bunch of deficit hawks who said the number one thing we got to do is we got to control the spending, and let's worry about tax reform and tax cuts later. But fortunately, Jack Kemp had power of persuasion and found this, say, seemingly, not very smart actor from California who he could coach on this and seemingly sell the guy on it. And Ronald Reagan, who was smart as hell, said this is the brilliant way to modernize the Republican Party, and Kemp Roth became the key part, a key element of the 1980 presidential campaign that changed America. So we got to have a little forbearance in this debate. We're going to have a little forbearance in listening to the ideas and suggestions of other people in our party about how we modernize ourselves and get ready for the next contests that are in the future, because we don't all know the right answers right now. I don't want to snuff out the next Jack Kemp. I say, oh, well, don't worry about it. He's not a principled person. We got to have some forbearance. And we got to stay focused on the big issues. Now, I know we've just gone through this sequester thing. Everybody's sort of focused on the sequester. Focused on this little thing, if you will, in a way. And we've avoided the big things sitting over here. Now, I don't want to diminish the importance of cutting $85 billion out of a $3.6 trillion budget. But let's be honest about it. It's 2.4% of the budget, and even after we finish getting the sequester in place, it will mean that the government will spend this year $18 billion more than it spent last year. We're not cutting like you had to cut here in California, in your state, your counties, in your cities, from this level down to here. We're reducing the future growth of the government. Admittedly, sort of semi-flatlining, but let's not kid ourselves. And we're going to be paying a lot of attention to this, because the president's going to be doing everything to stir up, like he has over the last couple of weeks. Ray LaHood. Oh, I've got to furlough 5,000 air traffic controllers, so your airplane's going to drop from the sky. My personal favorite was the Interior Secretary, Ken Salazar. He didn't say, I'm going to close the Washington Monument. He said, if the sequester comes through, I'm going to have to go out and close every national park campground. That's pretty cheeky. My friend Charles Groundhammer had a great piece in the Washington Post on Friday. Maybe you read it. If you didn't, you can go online, courtesy of Al Gore, and find it. Between bed and the internet and discovering global warming, how do you have time to do his job as vice president? Here's the real answer. Here's one paragraph out of this great piece called Hail Armageddon. A 2011 Government Accountability Office report gave a sampling of the vastness of what could be cut, consolidated, and rationalized in Washington. 44 overlapping job training programs, 18 for nutrition assistance, 82 on teacher quality, 56 dealing with financial literacy, more than 220 for programs for homelessness. Total cost, $100 to $200 billion a year, about 2 to 5 times the entire domestic sequester. One paragraph, Charles can come up with 100 to 200 billion. Smart man. But we're going to get stuck with all kinds of goofy things. One of my favorite is, I saw the other day, the head of the Federal Communications Commission said, I've got to come up with $28 million in savings. So he said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop buying equipment, and we're going to slow the hires here at the FCC, which means that it's going to take longer to get cell phone agreements done and longer to make decisions about getting revenue by auctioning off, sort of unused spectrum and all that kind of decision making that needs to be done, because I got to save $28 million. This guy is in charge of a $2.2 billion program for free cell phone service for low-income individuals that is riddled with fraud. 41% of the people, according to the FCC itself, on the list of the 5 biggest providers, 41% of the people getting the service were either ineligible for it or would not respond for documentation to prove they were eligible. And he's telling us that out of a $2.2 billion program, he can't find a nickel, but he's going to find his $28 million by slowing up the decision-making processes of his agents. This is what we're going to be subjected to. And it's going to sound great. And we're going to watch it, and we're all going to get spun up about it, like I might be spun up right now. But you know what? As we begin this process of getting up off of the mat and back in the game, it's important to keep our eye on the real issues. First big issue is, we got a problem in deciding what our problem is. They think our problem is not enough revenue. We think our problem is too much spending. Look, we went through a recession. Our revenues hit a low point. They've now recovered. They went down to about $2.5 trillion, and now this year expected to be $2.9 trillion. We've recovered about $380 some odd billion in revenue after the recession has ended. But our spending has risen $570 billion. The budget's gone from 2.9 to 3.6. And the other side says they can't cut. I love it. Did you see their sequester solution last week? Let's not cut $85 billion from the budget. They said we got an answer to replace those stupid across-the-board cuts. We're going to cut the defense budget, and we're going to cut the agriculture payments. But their bill ended up, and then we're going to raise taxes. But you know what? The bill didn't cut $85 billion for the budget. It raised the deficit by $7.2 billion. Well, these guys set out to cut. They can't even do that job. But we've got a problem in this country with a government that's getting too big and too expensive, and it's being reflected in our debt. When President Obama came into office, the debt was just over $10 trillion, $34,000 and some odd change for every man, woman, and child in America today, or back then. Today, the deficit is $16.6 trillion, which means that the average deficit for every man, woman, and child in America is now north of $51,000. The debt has gone up 57% since this guy came in. The public debt of the United States, that part of the debt that's been securitized in the form of a bond and sold to somebody, was at 40.8% of GDP when he came into office. Today, it is 73% of GDP. We're on our way to looking like Greece. Only the difference is there'll be no European Union to bail us out. And if you think China's going to keep buying our debt and save our problems for us, I've got some bridges in Brooklyn and some, wonderful land in West Texas that's got a lot of trees on it to sell you. We got a problem with it, and we're not paying attention to this. Because we're over there arguing about $85 billion when we're running a 4 years $1 trillion plus deficits. $1 trillion, that is 1,000 billions of dollars. We're not paying attention to the entitlement problem we got. Every April, the trustees of Social Security and Medicare are obligated by law to tell us when they're going to go belly up. Last April, they said that Social Security is going belly up in 2037. Now, I'll be 86 years old and drooling a lot, and I don't think I'll really care. I'll be okay. But can you imagine what's going to happen to a lot of Americans when that day hits, and if nothing is done, and their Social Security checks are cut by a quarter overnight? But at least FDR wrote the Social Security law so that we know what the answer is going to be. When LBJ wrote the Medicare law, nobody said what would happen if it went belly up. Do you know when it's going belly up? The hospital trust fund goes belly up in 2024. 2024. And we have no idea what will happen then because there's no description in the law. And the problem is we're making promises we can't keep. The average American will put in $109,000 in Medicare taxes over the course of their working career and take out $330,000 in expenses. And take the $220,000, put it on our credit card, and pass it on to our kids and grandkids. How fair and moral and right is that? And we're not paying attention. We are. Republicans are. But we as a country are not, because we've got a president who says it's all off the table. Not going to make the changes. But you know what the biggest problem is that we're facing? It's our economy.